The stadium janitor's evidency. The prosecutor held up the phone. This device contains 1,247 hours of footage showing Senator David Crawford receiving over $30 million in bribes. The defense attorney scoffed. Recorded illegally by a janitor. With a grudge. But when the first video played, Crawford counting cash while discussing dead witnesses, even the judge leaned forward. Marcus Thompson sat quietly in the witness chair. 3 years of being invisible had finally paid off. The video quality wasn't perfect. Shot from odd angles, sometimes partially obscured by cleaning supplies or the edge of a doorframe, but the audio was crystal clear. Senator David Crawford's distinctive Boston accent filled the courtroom as he counted $100 bills. "That's $3 million for the Harbor Project approval," Crawford's voice said on the recording. "Make sure Valdez understands. No bodies wash up this time. Last month's incident nearly cost me the election." "No problems, Senator," another voice replied. Roberto Valdez himself, head of the largest drug cartel operating on the eastern seaboard. "The new disposal method is much cleaner. Industrial incinerators leave no evidence." The courtroom was dead silent except for the sound of money being counted on the recording. Bill after bill, the rustling of cash, a soundtrack to corruption that reached the highest levels of government. Marcus Thompson adjusted his glasses and waited. He'd waited 3 years for this moment, 3 years of recording, documenting, building an archive that would destroy an empire of corruption, all because they'd never bothered to really see him. "Mr. Thompson," prosecutor Angela Martinez approached the witness stand. "Tell us how these recordings came to exist." Marcus straightened in his chair. At 54, he'd spent more than half his life being invisible, cleaning up after the wealthy, the powerful, the connected. Today, finally, they would have to see him. "I've been a janitor at Lincoln Stadium for 15 years, Marcus began, his voice steady despite the weight of every eye. "In the room. My shift starts at 11 p.m. after the games or events end. I clean the regular seats first, then the club level, and finally the VIP suites and Suite 12. Suite 12 is different. It's not rented out for games like the others. It's listed as maintenance storage on the stadium maps. But it's not storage. It's where they meet. There's Senator Crawford and his associates. Sometimes Mr. Valdez. Sometimes Judge Patricia Williams. Sometimes Police Commissioner Frank Torres. Always after midnight. Always when they think the building is empty." Defense attorney Richard Sterling rose. "Objection, Your Honor. Speculation about what people think. Overruled." "Judge Catherine," Morgan replied. "Continue, Mr. Thompson." Marcus nodded. "The first time I saw them was 3 years ago. March 15, 2021. I was assigned to deep clean all the suites during the off-season. When I got to Suite 12, the door was cracked open. I heard voices inside. What did you do? My job. I knocked, announced maintenance, and entered with my cleaning cart. Senator Crawford was there with 2 men I didn't recognize then. There was money on the table, a lot of money, and guns. How did they react? They barely looked at me. Crawford waved his hand and said, 'Just clean around us,' like I was furniture, like I didn't have eyes or ears." Marcus paused, remembering that night, the dismissive wave, the way they'd continued their conversation as if he wasn't there, the moment he'd realized his invisibility could be a weapon. "Before we continue this explosive testimony, where are you watching from today? Drop your city in the comments below. And if you believe that every worker, regardless of their job, deserves respect and can make a difference, hit that subscribe button." Justice System USA brings you stories that prove justice doesn't care about your job title. "That first night," Marcus continued, "I heard them planning to fix a construction bid. Crawford was promising to steer a $50 million contract to Valdez's company in exchange for a $3 million kickback. They discussed it right in front of me, like I was deaf, like I didn't matter. What did you do with this information?" "At first, nothing. I needed my job. I've got 2 kids in college, a wife with diabetes, good health insurance from the stadium. I couldn't afford to make waves." Marcus's voice carried a weight of shame. "I told myself it wasn't my business." "What changed?" 2 weeks later, I saw on the news that a family had died when their apartment building collapsed. Shoddy construction. The building was only 2 years old. Marcus's hands clenched. It was built by Valdez Construction, the company that got the contract they'd discussed. 7 people died, including 3 kids. The courtroom stirred. Several jurors leaned forward. That's when I started recording, Marcus said simply. I couldn't live with staying silent anymore. Prosecutor Martinez walked to the evidence table and picked up a basic smartphone. Is this the phone you used? Yes, nothing fancy, just a regular Android phone. I'd prop it in my cleaning cart, cover it with rags or supplies, and let it record. While I worked, the defense has suggested these recordings were made illegally. Can you address that? Marcus looked directly at Sterling. Suite 12 is technically a public space in a taxpayer-funded stadium. I was authorized to be there as an employee, and I wasn't recording private conversations. I was documenting crimes being planned in a building owned by the city. Objection. Sterling shouted. The witness is not qualified to make legal determinations. Sustained. Judge Morgan ruled. The jury will disregard the witness's legal opinion. Mr. Thompson, please, just tell us what you did, not your interpretation of the law. Marcus nodded. I recorded every meeting I could. Sometimes the audio was clear. Sometimes I could get video. I changed my cleaning schedule to make sure I was always working near Suite 12 when they met. How often did these meetings occur? Usually twice a week. Tuesdays and Fridays, after midnight. Sometimes special meetings when they needed to discuss something urgent. Can you give us an example of an urgent meeting? Marcus shifted in his seat. April 2022. A journalist named David Chen was investigating Senator Crawford's connection to Valdez. They met on a Wednesday, very upset. I recorded the whole thing. Martinez clicked a button, and audio filled the courtroom again. Crawford's voice, tight with anger. Chen knows too much. His article comes out Monday. Valdez's reply was chilling in its casualness. Don't worry about Chen. He's about to have a very unfortunate accident. Drunk driving is so tragic. A third voice, which Marcus identified as Judge Williams. I'll make sure any investigation gets assigned to the right detective, someone who understands the importance of quick, clean conclusions. The recording continued. Details of how they'd frame Chen, plant alcohol in his system, ensure his laptop and notes were destroyed in the crash. All discussed as casually as planning a dinner party. Mr. Thompson, Martinez asked quietly, what happened to David Chen? He died that Friday night. Single car accident. The police said he was drunk. His investigation into Senator Crawford died with him. The courtroom erupted. Judge Morgan banged her gavel repeatedly. Ordered, I will clear this courtroom if there are any more outbursts. When quiet returned, Martinez played another recording. This one showed video as well as audio. The quality was grainy, shot from inside a cleaning cart, but the image was clear enough. Senator Crawford accepting a duffel bag from Valdez, unzipping it to reveal stacks of cash. Your re-election fund, Valdez said in the video. $5 million, as agreed. Small bills, untraceable, and the harbor project. Crawford asked, running his hand over the money. Ready to go. We'll need your committee to fast-track the environmental waivers. A few dead fish shouldn't stop progress. Crawford laughed. Dead fish are the least of your problems if that toxic waste surfaces. Make sure it's buried deep. The video showed them shaking hands, sealing a deal that would poison the harbor and enrich them both by millions. Sterling rose for cross-examination, his face flushed with anger. Mr. Thompson, isn't it true you were fired from a previous job for theft? Marcus had expected this. 25 years ago, I was accused of stealing from a grocery store where I worked. I was 19. The charges were dropped when they found the real thief, but you were arrested. Yes, and cleared. I've worked honestly every day since. You expect us to believe you recorded these powerful men for 3 years out of civic duty. Not for money. I never asked for money. Never tried to blackmail anyone. I took these recordings to the FBI when I had enough evidence. After 3 years, why wait so long? Marcus met Sterling's glare steadily. Because I needed enough evidence to make sure they couldn't wiggle out of it. Men like Crawford don't go down easy. They have people like you to protect them. Objection. Sustained. Mr. Thompson, please just answer the questions. Sterling tried another approach. These recordings were made without consent. You violated privacy laws. I recorded crimes in a public building while doing my job. Your job was to clean, not spy. My job was to clean up messes, Marcus said calmly. This was the biggest mess in the building. Don't miss what happens next. This story gets even more incredible. Share this video with someone who needs to know that heroes come in all forms, including janitors with smartphones, and subscribe to Justice System USA for more unbelievable but true stories of justice. Sterling's cross-examination continued for hours, but Marcus never wavered. He'd prepared for this moment, knowing every recording by heart, every date memorized, every crime documented. Then Martinez began playing more recordings. Hours and hours of corruption laid bare. Crawford and his network had their hands in everything: construction fraud, drug trafficking, murder for hire, judicial bribery, police corruption. The stadium suite had been their safe space, their fortress where they could plan crimes without fear of being overheard. They'd never counted on Marcus Thompson. One recording stood out. Crawford, drunk after a playoff victory, bragging to Valdez, "You know what I love about this place? Complete privacy. My own security detail sweeps it for bugs. The only people who come in here are us, and that old janitor, and he's too stupid to understand what we're saying anyway." Valdez's laugh on the recording was cruel. "The day a janitor brings me down is the day I retire." Marcus had saved that recording for last. The irony wasn't lost on anyone in the courtroom. The evidence was overwhelming. Marcus had recorded meetings where they discussed murdering witnesses, bribing judges, trafficking drugs through the stadiums, loading docks, fixing elections, and stealing millions in city funds. He'd documented dates, times, participants, and outcomes. When the FBI verified his recordings against actual events, deaths, contracts, arrests that mysteriously fell apart, everything matched. But the most damning evidence came from Marcus's meticulous notes. He'd written down license plates, arrival times, even what they ate delivered from high-end restaurants, always paid in cash. His invisible presence had allowed him to create a complete picture of a criminal enterprise that reached from street dealers to the state capitol. "Mr. Thompson," Martinez asked in redirect, "why did you finally take this to the FBI?" Marcus was quiet for a moment. "My daughter graduated from college last year, criminal justice major. She wanted to be a prosecutor, to fight corruption and help people. At her graduation, she said something that hit me hard. She said, 'Dad, you taught me that doing the right thing isn't about being noticed. It's about noticing when something's wrong and having the courage to act.'" He paused, emotion creeping into his voice for the first time. "I realized I'd been noticing for 3 years, but hadn't acted. That night, I went home and copied all the recordings onto multiple drives. The next morning, I walked into the FBI office. What happened then? They didn't believe me at first. A janitor with recordings of a US senator. They thought I was crazy, until they started listening." The agent's face went white when he heard Crawford discussing the Chen murder. "Within an hour, I was in a room with a dozen federal agents. Were you placed in protective custody?" They offered. I declined. I kept working at the stadium, kept recording. The FBI wanted me to continue gathering evidence. For 6 more months, I cleaned Suite 12 while wearing a wire. The recordings got even clearer, and they never suspected a thing. The trial continued for 3 weeks. The government presented Marcus's recordings, corroborated by financial records, witness testimony from those brave enough to come forward, and forensic evidence that matched the crimes discussed in Suite 12. The defense tried everything. They challenged the authenticity of the recordings. FBI experts verified them. They claimed entrapment. Marcus wasn't law enforcement. They suggested Marcus had edited the recordings. Technical analysis proved otherwise. They attacked his character, his motives, his intelligence, but they couldn't attack the truth captured on those recordings. Senator Crawford's own words convicted him. His casual discussions of murder, his gleeful counting of bribe money, his detailed plans for corruption, all preserved by a janitor he'd never bothered to really see. The other defendants began to fall like dominoes. Judge Williams, faced with recordings of herself promising to fix cases, pleaded guilty and agreed to testify. Police Commissioner Torres, caught on video accepting bags of cash, flipped on his co-conspirators. The network of corruption that had seemed invincible crumbled in the face of Marcus Thompson's patient documentation. Roberto Valdez tried to run. He made it as far as the private jet he'd bought with drug money before the FBI arrested him on the tarmac. In his possession were fake passports, $10 million in bearer bonds, and a laptop containing even more evidence of his crimes. Throughout it all, Marcus continued working at the stadium. He arrived each night, pushed his cleaning cart through the corridors, and did his job. Suite 12 was sealed off as a crime scene, but Marcus cleaned around it. a daily reminder of what patient observation and quiet courage could accomplish. Where are you watching from today? Has this story changed how you think about the people society often overlooks? Let us know in the comments. And remember to subscribe to Justice System USA, because sometimes the most powerful stories come from the most unexpected places. The verdict came on a Thursday afternoon. The jury had deliberated for 2 days, though most observers thought it would take mere hours given the mountain of evidence. But the jurors were thorough, going through each charge methodically. On the charge of racketeering, we find the defendant, David Crawford, guilty. On the charge of conspiracy to commit murder, we find the defendant guilty. On the charge of bribery, we find the defendant guilty. The list went on. 47 charges in total, guilty on all counts. Crawford sat stone-faced as the verdicts were read. The man who'd once wielded enormous power, who'd decided who lived and died, who'd treated the law as his personal plaything, was now just another convicted felon. As he was led away in handcuffs, Crawford passed by Marcus, who was sitting in the gallery. For the first time in 3 years, the senator really looked at him, really saw him. The recognition in Crawford's eyes that this man he'd dismissed, ignored, treated as invisible, had brought down his empire, was complete. "You were there," Crawford said, stopping despite the marshal's attempts to move him along. "Every meeting, you were always there." "Every single one," Marcus confirmed. "You just never saw me. I see you now." Too late. Crawford was pulled away, heading for a federal prison where he'd spend the rest of his life. He wasn't alone. By the time the investigation concluded, 73 people had been charged based on evidence from Marcus's recordings. The stadium corruption case became the largest RICO prosecution in U.S. history, but for Marcus, the numbers were less important than the names. David Chen, the journalist who died for investigating the truth, the families in the collapsed apartment building, the witnesses who'd been silenced, the communities flooded with drugs while police looked the other way. They all deserved justice, and Marcus's recordings had finally delivered it. The FBI offered Marcus a commendation, a public ceremony honoring his courage. He declined. "I don't need medals," he said. "I need my job. I've got bills to pay." He returned to Lincoln Stadium, pushing his cart through the same corridors, cleaning the same suites. The stadium management offered him a promotion, a desk job with better pay. He turned it down. "I like being a janitor," he explained to his supervisor. "It's honest work, and you'd be surprised what you can learn when people think you're invisible." Suite 12 was eventually renovated and returned to use as an actual storage room. Marcus cleaned it twice a week, always remembering what had transpired there. The ghosts of conversations, the echo of crimes being planned, the rustle of blood money being counted, they lingered in his memory. One night, about a year after the trial, Marcus was cleaning the club level when a young man approached him. Well-dressed, expensive watch, the bearing of someone important. "You're Marcus Thompson," the man said. Not a question. Marcus tensed. Even with Crawford and his network in prison, revenge was always possible. "Yes, I'm David Chen Jr., the journalist who died. He was my father." Marcus set down his mop. "I'm sorry for your loss. Your father was a brave man." He was, and for years I believed he'd died in a drunk driving accident, that he'd been living a double life, that his investigation was just paranoid conspiracy theories. The young man's voice cracked. "Your recordings proved he was murdered for telling the truth. You gave me my father back, not alive, but his honor, his integrity." They stood in silence for a moment in the empty corridor. "Thank you," David Jr. finally said, "for seeing what others ignored, for caring when you could have stayed silent, for being brave when it would have been safer to be blind." He shook Marcus's hand and left. Marcus returned to his work, pushing his cart down the hallway, the squeak of its wheels echoing in the silence. Just another invisible janitor doing his job, but now people knew that invisible didn't mean powerless, that a mop and bucket could be tools of justice, just as surely as a badge or a gavel, that sometimes the most dangerous person in the room is the one you never bother to see. Marcus had spent 3 years recording crimes in Suite 12. The trials and investigations would continue for years more. Lives had been saved, corruption exposed, justice served, all because a janitor decided that being invisible didn't mean being silent. He finished his shift as the sun rose over the city, painting the stadium in golden light. Another night's work done. Another small contribution to keeping things clean. Marcus Thompson punched out, said goodbye to the security guard, and headed home. Tomorrow night, he'd be back, pushing his cart, wielding his mop, watching and listening. Because that's what janitors do. They clean up messes. Sometimes the messes are spilled beer and nacho cheese. Sometimes they're criminal empires, built on blood and bribes. Marcus Thompson cleaned them all. Thank you for watching this incredible story of how one stadium janitor brought down a massive corruption network simply by doing his job and refusing to remain silent. Marcus Thompson proved that heroes don't always wear capes or carry badges. Sometimes they carry mops and smartphones. What would you have done in Marcus's position? Would you have had the courage to record those crimes, knowing the danger? Would you have waited 3 years to build an airtight case? Let us know in the comments below. If this story inspired you, please subscribe to Justice System USA, hit that notification bell. Share this video with someone who needs to remember that every person matters. Every job has dignity, and everyone has the power to make a difference. Where are you watching from today? Whether you're in a big city or a small town, remember, corruption relies on people looking the other way. Justice happens when someone decides to truly see. Until next time, this is Justice System USA, where we believe that in America, a janitor can bring down a senator, a food truck owner can expose a corrupt judge, and a child's drawings can convict killers. Because justice isn't about who you are, it's about what you do when you witness wrongdoing. Keep watching, keep listening, keep fighting for what's right, because you never know when your moment to make a difference will come, and sometimes all it takes is pressing record.